Get started, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Inside the Parks. I'm Jamie Kelly, Chief Philanthropy Officer for the National Park Foundation, and I am so glad you could join us today for this webinar. Um, Before we dive into the conversation, I want to take a moment to thank you, our supporters, and our friends for being here. From the very beginning of our national park system until today, private philanthropy has played a critical role in protecting these extraordinary places. Donors have always stood behind parks, ensuring that places of natural beauty, history, and culture endure for generations. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you are new to the National Park Foundation, I'll take a second to remind everyone that NPF is the official nonprofit of the partner of the National Park Service, chartered by Congress almost 60 years ago with a singular purpose: to invite people like you to philanthropically invest in America's national parks. We are proud to serve as a trusted champion for parks, helping connect donor passion to meaningful on-the-ground impact. Our mission is simple and unwavering: to generate private support and build strategic partnerships to protect and enhance America's national parks for present and future generations. NPF's work is firmly mission-driven and nonpartisan. At the National Park Foundation, we focus solely on funding meaningful projects in parks, working with partners and allies across the political landscape to strengthen these places now and into the future. What unites us is a shared belief in the value of parks and the stories they hold. We know donor investment works. With a proven track record, the National Park Foundation translates philanthropy into lasting results, supporting conservation and restoration, expanding access, advancing education, and helping to protect the cultural and historical stories that define our national identity. We also believe in leading through collaboration. Last year, we delivered more than $83 million in grants to the National Park Service and to the hundreds of park-focused organizations and friends groups across the country, moving donor support quickly and effectively to the places, people, and programs that need them most. That commitment to impact is exactly why programs like Inside the Parks exist. These conversations are designed especially for you to offer insider perspectives, meaningful stories, and a deeper connection to the parks you help sustain. Today's conversation, I'm really excited for this, is all about exploration, storytelling, and the power of parks to connect us to our shared history. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our guest, Darley Newman. Darley is an award-winning storyteller and traveler whose work brings places to life by focusing not just on where we go, but why those places matter, the history they carry, the people connected to them, and the stories they hold for all of us. I know that Fort McHenry is one of my favorite park sites. It's just around the corner from my home in Baltimore. I love this place not only because it's of its role in our history, You're Welcome America for 1814, but because it reminds me that parks are where our national story becomes personal. They're places where history isn't abstract. It's felt, experienced, and passed on. That's why I've always been drawn to Darley's work. Like Fort McHenry, the places she explores aren't just destinations, they're living storytellers. They help us understand who we are, where we've been, and what we carry forward. So today's conversation really feels like a discussion between two people who share a deep appreciation for parks as keepers of our nation's story and for the role storytelling plays in keeping those places relevant and alive for future generations. Darley, we are so glad to have you here with us. Thank you for joining Inside the Parks.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. Hi, everyone. Yay. National
All
Park.
right. Darley, I love to get into these conversations by sharing memories. Tell me about your favorite national park. What's kind of your national park origin story?
So I couldn't pick just one. It's so hard. But Bryce Canyon National Park is one of my favorites. I have such good memories from being there in the springtime. I went horseback riding. There was a sprinkling of snow on the hoodoos. And it's to me, that park is our iconic American Western landscapes, which is what so many people think about when they think about national parks. So that's one of my favorites. But my background today is a second favorite, which I'm excited to be heading to again this summer, which is Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. North Dakota, I've done a number of episodes there for my series Travels with Darley, which is on PBS and streaming. And I love the conservation story connected with this national park. But I also, the history is just so dynamic and real when you're there. I was able to go out with Clay Jenkinson. He, is a scholar that has vast knowledge of Teddy Roosevelt, and exploring the park with him, again, a personal guide, just made it come to life. So can't wait to go back when the library is opening this summer and
Right.
experience it and film it again.
Library opening July 4th this summer, the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library in Medora, North Dakota. The TED heads will all be out. It's exciting, and we're also working on a great project there at Painted Canyon with the National Park Foundation. So I think you and I share a love of Medora, North Dakota. Everyone, put that on your list. It is a undiscovered gem that is one of the most unique places you'll ever visit. But Darley, coming to today, you've gone to the 13 colonies and left the landscapes of the West. And, now you've got a great new book coming out, June 30th, Revolutionary Road Trip. This book blends travel, history, and storytelling. And it's such an enticing way to think about celebrating our nation's 250th year. So, from the landscapes of the West to the Revolutionary Road Trip, talk about what inspired you to create this book and how the project came to life.
So it's funny because people are now obviously thinking about the 250th. It's coming right up. But I actually started a few years back documenting locations related to the American Revolution for my travel series. And I've spent years going to these sites and learning about many stories that really aren't in the history books. And that's what inspired me to write this book. I've done 12 half hours called Revolutionary Road Trip under Travels with Darley, where I've gone to these locations and, they're battlefields. There are lots of different locations that are not battlefields. There are churches, there are colonial taverns in Gettysburg, the Dobbin House, which many of you may know. I was going to Gettysburg to find Civil War history, and then I'm at a colonial tavern where I can drink in the history. So there are all these amazing locations. And there are all these people at the locations that are safeguarding this history. They're keeping it alive. They're finding out new stories. And I feel that part of what I do is impactful because I get to share stories that not everybody knows about and have people see a place in a different way. Any of the people on our webinar today who travel, because I know you all love to travel because you love our national parks, you know that going to these locations, it changes your perspective. It really opens your eyes. So I wrote the book because I wanted to tell an even more full story of going to these locations, immersing yourself in this history, meeting the people, and what you can discover there. And I think it's so exciting because these locations are places that you can go and visit.
I love that. And that tavern in Gettysburg is so special. The stories around the tables that you hear, it's just wonderful. It reminds me that everybody loves to talk about national parks. It's a unifier. It brings everybody together. And the one thing we always love about national parks, they're both entertaining and they're practical in every way, shape, or form. And that's kind of your book as well. You talk about your book being entertaining and practical. It's different from the traditional travel guide, the AAA triptychs that we used to go pick up before going to Sequoia and things like that as a kid. Talk about what's different about your book and what makes this exciting.
So I really do believe in immersing people in stories and the power of storytelling to really put you in that place to you can have the sights and the sounds that go with it. And I do a podcast, I do a show, and I write a lot and I love the writing because again, people can imagine being there when you bring them to the location, they can hear the dialogue, they can picture it, they can taste it. So this is narrative nonfiction. There are a lot of books coming out now that are they're straight up history books, and I love that as well. And I sprinkle in a lot of great history in this book, but I'm also literally taking you to those locations. So it's a mix of a guidebook and a history book. And there are places like a lot of people don't know that Princeton University had a battle on what is its campus today. And I mean, there's just so many colorful tales when you're traveling to these sites. I went out with Dan Link, who's the university archivist there, and he talked about Nassau Hall being there at this time period and how there was a battle that Alexander Hamilton was involved in, and he may have actually fired a cannon that could have damaged or gone through the wall of Nassau Hall and actually gone through a painting of King George II. And they think he may have taken his head out. And this is just such a colorful tale, and you can really imagine it being there. And we actually went outside of Nassau Hall where you could go and look to see if you can find the location where the cannon might have gone through the wall. So whether it's true or not, it's a great story that paints a picture with a colorful character that many people know about from history, but they may not know these other stories. And also places like Guilford Courthouse National Military Park. I found this fascinating. Greensboro, North Carolina. You're in a national park that, on the outskirts, you can be over at the Hoskins farm site and look out, and you're seeing a suburban neighborhood. But people are there recreating, they're enjoying this national park site. But all around, as you go through the park, there's signage to share the story of what happened. And as I talked to the park superintendent, I learned about a project where they're documenting the black patriots who fought in this battle, and they found over 40 of them. They're going through pension records, and they're finding out people like Andrew Pebbles, who was in the battle, and he did receive his pension later on, and then other people who didn't. We don't know why. But these are stories that I think are really interesting. And again, it's this history. People think about history, they think it's in the past. But at many of these sites, there are so many discoveries still being uncovered today. And this is from Greensboro, the Greensboro History Museum right nearby, another great place. I went inside, and I love going in museums if you can ever get a look back in what's not out on display. There's so many great artifacts. This comes in and out of rotation. This is a dress that they believe might have been Dolly Madison's dress, made potentially from the White House drapes. And there's a whole story behind that as well. So really great tidbits that bring the history to life when you're traveling there.
I absolutely love that. And I love what you said for amateur historians out there. The pension rolls, there's a lot of history in there. Go to the pension rolls. That's interesting stuff. You talked about North Carolina history, and I want to go back to memories. Your book celebrates our deep connection to history and places of remembrance. Many of our donors, myself, you, share your passion of traveling to historic sites and experience from these places firsthand. Where did that come from for you? Where did that passion to experience these things come from?
So I love to travel, honestly. And if you talk to my friends from high school, they'll tell you that I told them in high school I wanted to do a travel show. So, I mean, they're some of my biggest cheerleaders today. I have events, they all come to my events. I see them when I travel. Like, we all keep in touch because they're like, I can't believe you actually went and did that, Darley. And I said, I took this trip in high school with a friend's family to Europe, and it really opened my eyes. And I thought, wow, the food was amazing in Italy. And in France, I was looking at the architecture and I thought, wow, there's so much of the world I have not seen. And that made me want to go out and see it. And I went on to start the world's first horseback riding travel show, Equitrekking, which, if you haven't seen it or you didn't see it, it's coming back to streaming. Stay tuned, which I can't believe this evergreen content really does last. But in doing that, I then started travels with Darley, and I got to go to many national park sites that, again, people don't think of as national parks. I was along the Civil Rights Trail in Alabama, and I actually interviewed women who lived through the movement, and people like Doris Crenshaw, who slept on Rosa Parks' couch. As a child, she campaigned for voting rights at the age of 12. I mean, these are remarkable women. And I interviewed Joanne Bland, who, this is wild to me because I was capturing these stories knowing that a lot of these women were getting up in their years. And Joanne did recently just pass away. She marched in the Selma to Montgomery March, and she shared her story of being a child in that march and what she and her sister went through. It's literally heart-wrenching, and I've never gotten so emotional as I did with Joanne at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, hearing that story. And that was during COVID. It was the end of COVID after the vaccine had come out. And, it was hard to travel then. And I found myself saying, do I really want to continue doing this? And I met Joanne, and she just broke my heart. And I thought, I hope people tell these stories because they're just so important to hear. And again, Civil Rights Trail, you can go and you can walk in the footsteps of this history. And it's just remarkable. And I mean, I truly love that places like this are being preserved. I think it's amazing. New Mexico, I just saw the photos. Ghost Ranch, Georgia O'Keeffe spent time there. She painted these various scenes. As you go around the landscapes, you can see these beautiful, panoramic views. But there's a cowboy who still lives there on the ranch, who, as a child, grew up. His mom was friends with Georgia O'Keeffe. She used to make
Wow.
him smoothies. And you see these black and white photos of Georgia O'Keeffe, and you often think how stoic she is. But if you talk to David Manzanares, he will give you a different side of her personality. And if you talk to Doris Crenshaw in Alabama, she'll tell you a different side of Rosa Parks and how warm and personable she was. And, we always, you think of these historic figures in various ways, and it's not until you hear firsthand people that knew them personally in different ways that it comes to life in a different way.
And I think you talk about Selma. It's such a powerful place to visit. I encourage everyone to go there. There's a great visitor center, great interpretation that we're collecting from the people that you discussed, Darley. And traveling over to Birmingham, you also see some of the things that the churches and the motels and things that we've preserved. It's a great nod to the people who are helping us preserve these things that are so important for now and future generations. And Darley, there's so many stories. I mean, I would imagine you wake up and you have 10 more by the time you go to bed. How do you choose which one to highlight? 13 colonies. I mean, we just talked about Georgia O'Keeffe in New Mexico, but you looked at the 13 colonies. How did you choose which places and voices to include with so many out there and more adding to the roles every day?
One thing I've tried to do with everything that I've done is do things a little bit differently. I mean, I did start the world's first horseback riding travel show. People thought I was nuts when I was telling them I was going to do that. But it was a great show because it showed the world in a different way. When you're horseback riding, you're off the beaten path. You can go places that vehicles can't
Right.
go. And that's what I've tried to do with Travels with Darley. I'm in my 100th episode season, and I specifically seek out hidden gems. I've gone all over the US to places that people have asked me and said, "Well, why did you go there?" And I've found places that I think are truly special and that, sometimes in talking to the locals, they've said, "Oh, I forgot how special this area is," until I'm sharing it with someone who's coming from the outside to experience it. So, especially with Revolutionary Road Trip, I wanted to focus on not the normal suspects, basically. So, I didn't do Boston. I didn't do Philadelphia. I didn't go to Williamsburg. I went to Halifax, North Carolina. I went to Guilford Courthouse, National Military Park in Greensboro. I went to places that people didn't necessarily know the revolutionary story that is so vibrantly told there when you talk to the local docents, the guides, the historians, the park rangers. And so this is from Guilford Courthouse National Military Park. And not only are they doing this research into the Black patriots who fought there, but there's a really great preservation story, the first federally protected Revolutionary War battlefield, and one of the first. So that's a great story that I really tell in the book and go into greater detail on. And I thought that was, but also the everyday people. A lot of
Right.
these battlefields and sites, you don't I wanted people to look at this history and say I can see myself or I can kind of relate to that more. Camden Battlefield, I went out with a veteran who's also a military historian and talk about chills that I got from being on that battlefield with Rick Wise as he described how he felt and how he could relate to that being hallowed ground, having fought in Desert Storm himself. And that was a really meaningful experience. Then Saratoga National Historical Park. Saratoga, by the way, you can throw a stone and there's a historical marker. There's a gas station, convenience store chain called Stewart Shops where they have historical signage when you're pumping gas. The bank downtown in Saratoga, they have one of the men who started the bank. He has collected artifacts from the Revolutionary War that are on display in the bank. So you go to cash or check and you're you're seeing like a saber or something on display. And I mean, Jamie, I don't know if you've been to Saratoga National Historical Park yourself yet.
I have not. That's one of them I have not been able to get to yet.
So this one, I'm telling you, it's not only Benedict Arnold, but Lauren Roberts, who's the county historian who is featured in my episode, and she's also in the book. She shared a lot of great information about her research and reading the journals and the entries from what many people call one of the first female war correspondents. She was a baroness. She came over from Germany. She was there at the Saratoga surrender site, and her experience in coming into Saratoga with her children in a carriage and hiding out in a basement. I mean, it made me think about what it would have been like to either be a mother or a child in this setting. So these are stories that you don't always hear. Ranger Clower, who took me out to Saratoga Monument, that is fascinating. I think the monuments tell their own stories. I was just at Gettysburg National Military Park, so many monuments there telling a story, but Saratoga Monument's fascinating. If you read this in the book or go look it up, you'll find that there are depictions inside the monument. This monument was created 100 years after the Revolutionary War, and they're totally untrue. So it was like history was rewritten, and it is encapsulated inside this monument. They have a story of Catherine Schuyler, the Schuyler sisters, burning wheat crops so the British can't get them. And I thought it was so interesting that this is in this monument. You think of monuments, you think of these things in even national parks that you're going to go learn the history. And I left there saying, I hope people know that that's not true when they go in to visit this.
Well, hopefully we've corrected that. And you just brought up something that triggers me to think about action with our guests. We've now talked about Teddy Roosevelt. We've talked about Guilford military or Guilford Courthouse. We talked about Saratoga. Um, it's tough to make to hit all the sites in a national park road trip, and you're doing some of the heavy lifting for us. But what are some tips as people think about their own Revolutionary road trip for this 250th year? What's some advice you have to travel planners as they think about going out to build a meaningful itinerary?
So I've literally been traveling for 2 decades, so I could definitely write a book that would be a separate book on how to plan these road trips. But first of all, road trips are a great way to chart a course and see these places. And you could go up and down the East Coast on your own Revolutionary road trip to discover these locations. But I am a big fan of definitely planning a lot of the stops, where you're going to stay, you have it ahead of time, and keep in mind that you could do mainstream hotels, you can do B&Bs, you can do inns, but plan enough so that you're organized about what you're doing and you've done some research, but then realize you're going to get to a location and you're going to talk to a guide or a docent, or you may take a tour and you're going to hear about something else that you want to do. So leave room to do those other things, leave some breathing room. And also keep in mind, one thing I love about traveling to the national park sites and these sites and the sites featured in the book, nearby, there are so many great places to eat, to drink, to do other recreation. South Carolina's upcountry in particular, I am from the state of South Carolina. It has a close place in my heart. And this did not make it into the book because I wrote it after I had already gone to these locations. But the upcountry, Spartanburg area, there are a couple national parks up there where you could do a really great road trip and you can center it in Spartanburg. There's a place called the Clevedale Inn where I stayed, and I know we've now sent travelers there. Historic inn in Spartanburg that not a lot of people in Spartanburg knew was there, I figured out. And there's a caboose in the back of the inn. It's a railroad caboose that you can glamp in, which I think is pretty cool. You can go to Kings Mountain, Cowpens, 96 National Historic Site, which is definitely an underrated national park with its Star Fort. very fascinating. And there's a cool pecan company, 96 Pecan Company nearby. Lots of family-owned businesses that you can go. Wade's James Beard award-winning comfort food, a meat and three restaurant in Spartanburg. So again, great road trip itineraries to plan and enjoy. So, and there's a picture there of my crew. We're all at Wade's because they have Thanksgiving dinner year round, which I thought was pretty neat.
I'm
So,
into it. I like it. Okay. Uh,
national parks by day, Thanksgiving dinner by night.
I'm hoping that somebody on this webinar will stay in the caboose and send the National Park Foundation a picture, and we'd love to see what that looks like. That sounds really exciting, and I know I'm going to be in Spartanburg later this summer, so I've got two things to add to my trip there as well. Um, Darley, I want to make sure that we leave some time for Q&A, but a few more questions. Some of our guests love to journal or sketch as part of their travels. Um, Talk about how that's inspired you and tips and other things to help people as they're there. Also, it's leaving kind of a history for the next generation as well. So, talk about tips that you might have for people who enjoy journal writing or sketching as part of their travels.
So, anyone who knows me, first of all, I was at the Chicago Sports Museum and learned that I have a very long wingspan. So, which is why I'm so good with selfies. So, I do take pictures everywhere I go. I think photographing these sites and locations, I always take pictures of all of the signage. Later on, you might, go back. Might want to go back and revisit these locations and learn again. And I find that in going through the photos, it really helps me remember things in a different way and sometimes little details. But I also recommend, it sounds weird, but send it friends and send yourself potentially a postcard. I was on this interesting retreat at the end in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's commuting with horses, this Equus experience. At first, I thought it might be cheesy because I love horses, but I was like, I'm not sure about communing on the ground with them. Turned out to be amazing. And at the end of it, the leader suggested that we write ourselves a postcard about what we got from the experience. And it's a short way to write a note to yourself. And she actually kept it and sent it 2 months later. And it really brought back a flood of memories of what I felt and what I learned that day, which I thought was fascinating. So maybe write yourself a postcard once in a while and either keep it, in your back pocket and pull it out later on, or you send it to yourself with the mail. And mail takes a long time sometimes these days. So you might get it a little later than you thought. And then you'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't remember this about my experience.
I love that. I still have the postcard I mailed to myself in sixth grade from Sequoia, coming down from Morro Rock, where I also realized I'm afraid of heights. But I love that suggestion. I love that idea. I hope others who are listening to this do this and pass that along to their generations because it's a really special way to connect. Talking about connecting, you have connected this project to impact, and I opened our webinar today by talking about the impact that the people who are joining us today have had, as well as the impact of the National Park Foundation. Your team has indicated a portion of book sales will support the National Park Foundation. What inspired that decision, and what do you hope that it helps us enable to accomplish?
So it is part of my publisher's mission, which is, women-owned publishing company, and I love that. So that was part of something that she believes in and that felt strongly about as well. And I mean, I love these places, and it's not easy to keep up, even these vast swaths of land. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into keeping it open for people to enjoy. And these are our public lands. So I think it's just really important to spread the word about them, to visit and do so responsibly. But I think our national parks are just treasures. So I think people can spread the word and share the lesser known places, lesser known parks. There are a lot of there's parks that people know about, but there are so many that they fly a little bit under the radar. So look at those on your next adventures, and also pay homage to them on your travels.
They're probably also a little less crowded, and you might have a little more access to interp and other things. So I love that. But you just talked about how many people are unsung, are behind the scenes, making these parks still come to life. Many people here have been generous with us. there are other ways that people can help. And in addition to purchasing the book, we talk about the volunteers, the other efforts within the national park system. Darley, any suggestions you have on other ways people can help the parks beyond just purchasing the book, donating to the National Park Foundation? You've met a lot of great volunteers over your time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these national parks also have volunteer opportunities. Not only the Citizens Archivist Project that Guilford Courthouse is a part of, but there are other ways to document that history and get involved. And then I do think, again, taking a tour and going out and doing the events that are scheduled at these parks is a great way to support them. And joining local friends groups as well. There are a lot of great friends groups that are active out there that we find as great resources as we're traveling to do our show. So those are all amazing ways to spread the word and show your love.
Yeah. I want to talk about the generation that's probably not on the webinar right now, and that is our younger generation. And history is sometimes boring, but it's also sometimes exceedingly exciting, and we see blossoms of brilliance into the future. Talk about young people. Any tips for families, parents, and grandparents to nurture curiosity around history, around revolutionary history, especially?
Yeah, so I think again, these road trips together, any time spent together, I think is a great way. But one thing I've been surprised about, Jamie, especially on my travels, is that there are a number of young people I've met at these different parks and places in Dover at the First State National Historical Parks in Delaware. Jane Pilato is a reenactor who's in my book, and she started at a young age, again, volunteering in New Jersey at parks, and then went on, and now she is working at the John Bell House. And her passion for making her own clothes. I mean, and I loved it. She's like, I'm watching YouTube videos to make these historically accurate garments that I'm wearing. And I thought that was really interesting. And in Princeton Battlefield State Park, Will Krakauer, who's also, I documented his story. He's a self-proclaimed cat lover who is of the younger generation reenacting at Princeton Battlefield State Park. And again, a lot of people are getting involved in small ways. So I think just fostering any sort of glimmer of interest is something that's great to do for young people. But the best thing is the more people we can get out together experiencing this history, especially as multiple generations of travelers are really hitting the road together. It's a big trend right now. I think those are that's really just going to help move things forward.
Ken Burns said, the only thing better than going to a national park is going to a national park sitting next to your best friend. And
Oh.
I take that, and I think whoever you see around you, your pass gets four people in. Use that and take as many people. I want to close out with this question before I see an avalanche of guest questions, so I'm going to have to pick those out. But before we turn the program over to our attendees and their questions, if our guests remember just one idea today, just one takeaway, one tip from your book, what would you want it to be and why?
I think a big thing is getting out of your comfort zone by traveling to new places near or far because you really don't have to go far to have a great new adventure. I mean, live in New York City, so I say that with a grain of salt because there's so much here, but in so many places there are awesome things to discover that are really in our own backyards that not everybody thinks about. So just being curious and then taking the time to listen. If you can make the extra time to stay for the tour that's offered, you will learn so much. And sometimes it's too much. I'm not, but you're going to have takeaways. I'm telling you, because the people on the ground at these sites, they are so passionate. They know so much, and they will be more than willing to share it with you. And you will learn a lot on your travels when you listen to the local guides that are at these locations. The locals are the best ones to share the information.
I love it. And again, what you just said is helpful tips for all of our listeners and attendees. Look for those other parks. Sometimes you might be in a great place and you can go a mile up the road. There's available parking and just as good of a view. Do research and try and get out. Well, this has been great, but we have some great questions from our attendees. And one of them you just kind of talked about. It's staying for the tour, staying for that extra conversation. You did so much. What location did you have to leave out that you wish had been included in the book?
Oh, that's a hard one because again, I do wish I could put the upcountry of South Carolina in, because you know, the Cowpens, Kings Mountain National Military Park really struck me. The park ranger who I interviewed there said there's not a day that goes by that he does not meet someone who is descended from someone who fought in the Battle of Kings Mountain.
Wow.
Every day he's meeting people who are tracing. A lot of people are still traveling again for genealogy to trace their roots. And the Revolutionary War, a lot of people are going to Kings Mountain apparently every single day, and they are walking through these pathways. And there's actually a really easy route that's paved within the park that you can go around to experience the national park and see the landscapes that were so important to what happened with the battle there.
Yeah.
So that would be definitely some locations that I would want to include that I didn't get to put in this book. So maybe I'll have to do a part two.
I think this topic needs a part two. The next 250 maybe we could think about. You brought up something that I wanted to just ask about. In a lot of these places you've been to, what's the mobility issue? Is it paved? Is it easy for people to get around, or is this like some of the issues in the West where we have maybe more aggressive hikes?
There are a lot of places that are wheelchair friendly, wheelchair accessible. There are certain trails that you may not be able to chart, but I think a lot of these places are on the East Coast that are in the book, and so there are easy ways to get to these sites. I actually just worked with Wheel the World, which is an organization that looks at different places and kind of charts the level of wheelchair accessibility that there is, because it, as many people know that have looked into this topic or have family members, or maybe you are in a wheelchair yourself, you know that it's different for everybody.
Right.
So that's one organization that we worked with in North Alabama, where we actually went to some national park sites, and that are very accessible. So it's different. You just, again, have to do your research and
Right.
planning and look it up. But a lot of the sites have paved trails that are specifically there so that people of all different mobility levels can get out and enjoy it together.
So this is a question, and I love this. It came from one of our users. I love to take my grandkids to national parks. Any tips for parents and grandparents to nurture this type of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this travel together, the passport programs where a lot of national park sites have these as well, where you can stamp it. And a lot of not just national parks, but national parks are included as well in other passport type programs that are run by local tourism organizations, the cities, the places that you'll visit. And this is not kid friendly. There are wine trails, there are beer trails, and then there are history trails. And then there are just local trails. But I think stamping those passports is a really fun way for the whole family to get involved. And it gives a goal and a set of things to keep in mind. The interpreters at many of these locations are awesome for families traveling together. So look for those special programs or call ahead or send a note and find out when they're doing different interpretations, or there's different programs that are family friendly, because those are great. The movies are always great, but I just think it's really nice when there's someone on site that you can meet. And again, places like the John Bell House will have interpreters there usually when they're open. But if you know that information, it can make for a really nice interactive experience for the whole family.
I love that. I'd also say for this question, it is a myth that there is an age limit on junior ranger badges. Anybody of any age can get a junior ranger badge, and I encourage you to do that with your children, your grandchildren. It's a great way to get closer into the history, talk about things, engage with rangers. And a tip that a ranger told me one time, in addition to stamping your passport, stamp the back of your ranger badge. It'll give you the date that you were there and other things. So a few other quick tips there. Um, this is a great question, I think, about your preparation. What do you do for your novel research, and what advice would you give to aspiring historical writers?
Oh, wow. Um, well, I mean, I record as much as I can, not only with, I mean, I record a lot of this professionally for my episodes, so I'm getting a lot of content, but then I actually record a lot of the audio with my phone. For the type of book I was writing, I wanted to be able to quote people directly.
Mhm.
And, you can't possibly remember all that stuff accurately unless you record it. If you read my book, you'll see a lot is paraphrased, but then I did do a lot of, I quoted people a lot because I had the transcripts, because I recorded stuff on the ground, both for my show, my podcast, and then because I knew I was doing this book. So, I think that's a great way to keep notes. And again, taking those photos of the signage and the little details, because I think so much of writing is in the details. And if you can write great descriptions, that's something I try to do. I go back to photographs and pictures and videos, and I listen to the sounds of of what I have in the videos, and I look at, and I go on a deep dive, and I'm like, what was that? What are the where did the logs come from for that log cabin at the Hoskins farm in Guilford Courthouse? I mean, it could be almost too much, because then I'm like, wait a minute, when I was thinking about the John Bell house and doing research, there were so many and there's details I couldn't even put in the book, because that is, I think, the oldest wooden structure, but they had intricacies about the types of nails that were used. And then I would have to look up the type of nail because I've never heard of it. And it just, you go on this deep dive. So you have to pace yourself, but there's a lot of great ways to document it as you're traveling so you remember later on.
And I'd imagine in this day and age, there's so much information that we have access to. You don't have to get on your horse and go and look at an archive somewhere. It allows for that type of ability to get to the nails within 10 minutes rather than in 10 hours, which might lose the luster after a while.
You know what's funny though? I will tell you, I am reading the audio. I'm doing an audiobook version and I'm narrating it. I did have to audition for that. I was surprised. I was like, what? I can't read my book. They're like, I had to send some samples. I was like, all right, I'll do it. But there are you things are accessible, but they're not, because there's a lot of names of people and there are a lot of words that are in my book that you'll read. And if you go listen to the audiobook, I hope I'm pronouncing them correctly, because I have been contacting historians. Some people don't even know. There's some names that they weren't recorded at that time period. So it's somebody's best guess on some of these, which I think is fascinating.
Interesting, interesting. Um, I like this question. Which parks in your book might you lean into for visiting African American history in particular?
So Guilford Courthouse for sure, but then look at the John Dickinson Plantation, which is part of National Park Service in Delaware. Fascinating story there. They found the remains of an African burial ground, and it's you can walk to it from the main homes and the main structures. And again, there's the main home, and then some structures have been created. It's the home of the penmen of the Revolution. But they are figuring out what they've contacted descendants, and they're figuring out what to do with the African burial ground. Right now, it's marked off. You can kind of visualize where it is, but that's another instance where history is still being uncovered and revealed. And I think that's really interesting. And then also at the Newcastle Courthouse, and then in Dover, there's other history related to enslaved peoples. But it's and in Charleston, South Carolina, there's so much as well. But everywhere, I sprinkled in different history of people that, again, we wouldn't necessarily think about because they weren't the main names at the time. And that, I think, is something that's interesting as people are traveling and looking at these parks and places.
I love it. I love it. Well, Darley, I'm looking at the time and I want to be respectful for everyone who's joined us. And this went by, it felt like we literally just started and we could talk for another 2 hours. But um, I want to make sure everyone knows Darley's book is coming out on June 30th. In all fashions and forms, please pick up multiple copies and share them with your friends. Darley, you've also got a book tour coming up. Charleston and Saratoga were two places I heard. Please look on Darley's website for other places that she can be and read the book and come with additional questions. Darley, any final thoughts for our audience?
No, I mean, I have tons of resources out there, TV shows on YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel, podcast. the book. I will be on this book tour, Charleston, June 28th, Greensboro, June 30th, Oyster Bay, July 15th. So you look to connect with me. I'm also on social media, and I really do love sharing these stories. I think it's important, and I love visiting places. So if you ever need tips, reach out.
I love it. Darley, hopefully you and I are going to get a beer up in Gettysburg at some point in time. Thank you so much for such a wonderful and inspiring conversation. Thank you for sharing your stories, insights, and experiences. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. We're so grateful you took the time to be a part of this Inside the Parks program. We hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired to learn, explore, get on a road trip, come visit Fort McHenry, watch the movie at Fort McHenry. I'm 100% in taking people there and having them leave misty-eyed. We love all of these things. We love our parks. Thank you for your support. Darley, thank you for the conversation. Look forward for the book to come out. Everybody, will see you on the next Inside the Parks conversation. Thank you for joining us today.